So we have changed things up a little bit, and this is our second time. Yesterday was our first time. We're trying to figure out, for the people who can't come in person on Friday mornings, because their kids are on spring break or whatever, but maybe they're at home or they're someplace and they can't make it, but they still want to participate. Or maybe they're UW Milwaukee. Yeah, Elaine. How can we get them involved? And what we had been doing was just doing a YouTube stream, live stream. But because of the bit rate or the resolution of the camera, they couldn't see the screen all the time, which actually is good because every once in a while we'll talk about student information and that'll be up on the board, and we don't want them to be able to see that, so that was actually by design. We could have upgraded the camera, but we didn't in order to keep that private. But what we've tried to do now is we've got a Blackboard Collaborate course. So if they are a wisc.edu faculty, instructional staff, etc., and they want to come, they can log in with their wisc.edu, come to our Canvas site, access the activity sheet, and all of the good things that are in the Canvas site. They can chat with us. They can. This is all in theory. They can interact. We can see them chatting. They can raise their hand, and we can say, "Oh, so and so from Milwaukee or wherever on vacation at a conference somewhere has a thing to say," and we'll be able to incorporate them. Yesterday worked sort of okay, but we're still trying to figure out what's going on. Anyway, so that's what that's all about. Thank you for dealing with it as we try to deal with it, and dealing with me as I try to figure out how to make this smooth. So back to the lab. You've all been to the labs before, is that correct? So you know that it's all about communication and getting people in to share their experiences, and then we sort of have an emergent discussion based on this. And we've done a lot of them in the past, and we've got a schedule that you can take and hang in the hallway, your favorite hallway full of instructors, so they all see it. As I was saying, we've been videotaping it, and we've got a lot of these. One of the cool things about this is if there is something that you hear that you want to share with colleagues, we've got resources for you to do that more directly. As with many of the campus programs, one of the metrics that we are assessed by is how many people show up. Thank you for showing up today. Another way that we look at things is by filling out these reflection sheets. So if you could, on your way out, just check a couple of boxes. At the bottom of the reflection sheet, we have a space for other comments and topic suggestions. So if there's something you want to see in fall that you're thinking, wow, campus really needs to talk about this, put it down there and we'll try to make that happen. We also use the data that we get from these sheets to figure out how to make it better. We're excited about the Active Teaching Lab, and we're kind of happy about what we've been able to do so far. UW Milwaukee is now doing them, using much the same format. On Wednesdays, if you are still interested in learning more about Canvas, they're transitioning to Canvas right now. So they're doing a lot of the topics that we did last year or 2 years ago. And that's great. So strategies for effective discussions in Canvas. But they'll have the UW Milwaukee perspective of it, which teaching is teaching. So even though the Canvas looks a little bit different for UW system than it does for UW Madison, there's still a lot of good stuff there. The other thing is if you are planning or currently teaching an online course, this is such a good, Teach Online at UW is such a good course for that. So if you are, or if you know somebody is, send them to teachonline.wisc.edu and get involved in that. This is exciting. This just got approved. Pick up a sheet. If you know anybody, faculty, instructional staff, graduate students, TAs, anybody who wants to take a course on leveraging tech to learn. The big thing about the end of the course is by the end of the course you will have started a skeleton of the dream course that you would like to teach. So we start off module, create modules, we'll talk about good pedagogy, good system, and we'll step you through that. And that falls during this time, so you'll also see a lot of good tools. And then the hour after this, we work on your projects, we talk a little bit further about what are the direct applications to your course, etc. All right, so what we do today in the lab today is we will start off by going around the room and looking at sort of it should be subtopics. Subtopics on the topic of assessing, and assessing is really the wrong word. Let's call it reflecting on what's happening in your classroom. There is a cool, I think it's pretty cool, framework in game design that is called Mechanics, Dynamics, and Aesthetics. And it's basically a circular thing where you say, all right, what are the mechanics that we have? So in a classroom, this would be, well, we're in a classroom. We've got tables, we've got chairs, we've got the Canvas learning management system, we've got students. These are the things that we have to work with, right? And then what are the dynamics of that system? And you say, what actually happens in the classroom? And we look at what happens in the classroom, and basically in traditional education, we've all sort of seen what happens in the classroom. People sit, they listen, somebody stands, they talk, slides are shown, assignments are given, things like that. And then we say, so what are the aesthetics of that? Like, is this what we want to happen, or do we want something else to happen? If we want more interaction to happen, what are the things that we can change about the mechanics? What are the systems that need to change in order to do that? In video games, it's, we've got a cartoon character, you press the button, they jump, you press a different button, they do this, and they run, and you move the joystick. These are some of the things. We've got single players, or maybe we've got two players playing with each other. And video game designers can adjust that and say, let's make them run faster, let's make them run slower, let's allow for different things. Just as instructors in the classroom can say, let's tweak this assignment and make it a discussion. Let's add some roles to the discussion. Let's add some scaffolding from this assignment to that assignment to the next assignment. We can tweak a lot of these things. There are some things we can't tweak, right? We're assigned a classroom that we often don't have any control over. We're assigned to students that we often don't know very much about what their interests are, what their current skills are, what they already know about the topic. But we can do some work with that. So today's topic of sort of reflecting on the classroom is, let's look at that process. What is happening? What can we change? What can we not change? But how can we affect what is happening to get the results that we want to see, and that hopefully is easier for us to teach, and less stress, and better learning outcomes for the students, also with less stress. So let's make this as smooth of an experience for instructors and teachers together. Right, because that's often my goal. So the MDA, Mechanics, Dynamics, Aesthetics framework is one way to think about that, but there are certainly others. So with that kind of intro, what are some of the things what brought you here today? Would anybody like to start? Tell me who they are and any particular interests. And what we'll try to do is we'll try to address those and give you some takeaways.
I'll start.
All right.
I have been interested in self-assessment, but not necessarily videotaping what goes on in the classroom. But I've been trying to come up with a system of incorporating an assessment into each individual assignment in the course. And so, rather than wait till the end of the course where students have an evaluation of the entire course. A lot of times it's more useful to get targeted information about a specific assignment as the people are working on it. You know, so what works, what doesn't work, what they like, what they don't like. And so I haven't found the ideal way to incorporate that, and so I was wondering if anybody else had.
Awesome. And I love that you're saying that, because if we had that grain level size of assessment, we'd have so much more information to work with, and we could make changes right away. If we just do it at the end of the semester, it's kind of like you have to wait until the next semester to apply things. Good. Tim, or is it Sarah? Sally? Sally.
Yeah, so I'm interested in a number of different things. I am interested in myself going into faculty development, so I'm interested in how instructors do self-reflection for themselves in the classroom, outside of the classroom, etc. And because all of my work has really been doing stuff that's offline, right? Like you write notes, you might do worksheets, you get students to do different things, but I have not really done too much in what would be a technological way of going about self-assessment.
All right.
Yeah.
Very good.
Hi, I'm Betty. I don't really teach any courses right now. I'm just interested in learning for the future, I guess. And both of those topics are what I'm interested in, I guess.
All right.
Really to add.
Excellent.
I'm Danny. I also haven't had a chance to teach in a classroom setting, but I'm doing more mentoring as years go on.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been trying to find ways to get feedback from the people I kind of help, like share resources with and stuff I develop. Just understanding what's effective to help them learn and get up to speed.
All right, and actually this is trying to think about how to do this is so it's instructional feedback to benefit learner. And that's interesting because we often have, like, students get feedback from grades, right? I did this I took this quiz, I got this many right, I got this many wrong. In many ways, that's the feedback that they get. But what I'm hearing you say is, what feedback can the instructors get about the student performance that the instructor then can make some changes, in many ways, like that mechanics, dynamics, aesthetics thing, to help the students. So it's not just the students saying, what do I need to do better, but it's the instructor saying, what do they need to do, or what do I need to do differently so that they can do things better. Good.
Yeah, I'm Dustin. I'm now emeritus, but I do.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But I work a lot with institutions in Indonesia in developing their Arabic programs, and about the methods of making them more interactive. And so I think also important thing is how you can get the students to speak, but then how to get them to what's a good way of error correction, and how that you could observe that in a classroom, how the instructor subtly, that's an issue of how you correct an error of a student without making them feel embarrassed, and that's a very delicate issue.
It is, and it's a really not just for students, right? It's like embarrassing for instructors, and often even for instructors, we hesitate to have somebody else come into our classroom to observe, to assess, to evaluate, because it puts pressure on us as well. Sal can talk to that, I think. And Tim.
Hi, yeah, I'm Tim. I work in the program in ESL, so I generally have quite small classes. And I got interested in self-assessment several years ago when I went to a conference, an ESL conference, and the keynote speaker there was Tom Farrell, who's a fairly well-known name in our field in terms of reflection. And a lot of what he would talk about would be get someone to go into your classroom, you know, and do a movement chart, or you know, note down how many times you interact with each student in the classroom. There were lots of different ways of assessing and talking about that. And so my follow-on from that really is, how can you do that in a way that doesn't feel threatening, I guess? So I work in a program, and the only formal observations we do tend to be kind of linked to performance reviews or promotion or keeping your job. So how to kind of bring that into a program in a way that doesn't feel quite so hostile. That's
yeah.
And the other side of it, of course, is kind of, as we've been speaking to, is when we design classes and we think about our learning objectives, you know, for the lesson. How do we build in there what is the evidence that we've achieved that, and that should be, I think, part of our self-assessment too.
So there's not only learning outcomes for assignments, but there's also teaching outcomes, like where we look at how well did this assignment accomplish the goals that we wanted it to do.
Right. Right.
Good. I'm going to actually put that down as teaching outcomes. On the activity sheet, oh, Margaret.
Yes, I'm Margaret. Hello, I'm a grad student at the iSchool, but I work here with John in active teaching, and what you said really made me think of an experience I had in a course. The course was called Supervision of Instruction. It was all about how to build a relationship with a colleague or a peer, who then you would establish sort of a contractual relationship, and they would observe your instruction, but only in the areas that you both agreed on. And it was really a powerful concept, because within this contract then, you're you know, as an instructor, you're trying to improve certain skills. And if you have someone come in and supervise or observe, you want them to focus on the areas that you want them to focus on. And so it's I think it's more meaningful. You have a sense of agency. This is what, don't comment on these other things. Don't distract from what I'm trying to improve on. But so the instructor can have some really targeted objectives for the observer. And you can build a peer mentoring relationship that way. As an instructor, there's an awful lot of information out there on that, and I would recommend that if you can, if you're in a position to have some mentoring, some peer mentoring.
Instructor-driven options, and in many ways that feeds back onto, it's not for us to come in and assess you, it's for you to sort of take the lead of that. And that's, in some ways, that's where I'm thinking that these things can offer us so much sort of safe opportunity. You know, we can set this up in the back of our classroom, go around, videotape the whole thing. Nobody sees it except for me.
Yep.
Right? It is safe for me to do this. I can then go in and look at how much do I let the students talk to each other. Do they talk to each other, or are they talking about what they did last night or whatever? If they're talking about what I did last night, maybe I can make some changes to the assignment and give them a little bit more structure in that discussion so that that changes. I can change some of the mechanics so that the dynamics change so that it looks more like what I want it to look like, the aesthetics of it. And if I do something really well, then I can say, hey, trusted colleague, can you see other things here that, you know, in the area of this, are there things that I'm missing because we're all blind to our own behaviors and certain things in our own behaviors, and we never realize that we do certain things until somebody else points them out. Like I often tend to move around way too much that it becomes distracting. And I never realized that until somebody pointed it out. So it's a constant conscious battle for me to just sort of slow down and be still.
But John, to the point made earlier, I think that's made the point is, were you embarrassed by that observation, or did it come to your realization in a way that you could take ownership instead of feeling self-critical or self-doubting or embarrassed? Because the whole goal would be to have someone self-identify and say, you know, I can do better, I got it.
Yes, and I think that that's what it was. It's like I'm often an enthusiastic person. I'm not embarrassed about being an enthusiastic person. But I do want to be as effective as I can. So it was more of in the light of, can I do better? What can I do to be a little bit better at this? So I wasn't embarrassed, no. But you know, anytime that we receive feedback about our behaviors, or we notice something like, oh, I've got something on my, I didn't know that before, so I wasn't embarrassed about it, but now that I know about it, I get feedback on it, like, what else is wrong with me? And you start becoming hyper-conscious about that. So I think that's a really valid point about, can I start off being, you know, are there things that I can notice myself in this safe space, take care of them, hopefully, and then say, all right, now that the really embarrassing parts are done, can you see other things about it, trusted colleague? And once we get better, then I'll be like, all right, you know what? This class that I did here, I think I did a pretty good job.
And then to build on what you're saying, John, I think it's so important to give our students the same benefits of that method or of that self-realization that, hey, I can do better. I'm in a safe space. I'm getting really nice feedback from my peers in a classroom or an online situation. So developing that safe space, we talked about it yesterday, about working in groups, cohorts or groups or teams. So they built a relationship with somewhat, I don't mean trivial tasks, but small challenges, right? They build that teamwork online in the Canvas space or wherever, so they know each other's names. They get to know a little bit about each other. Then, you know, I think of sports, if some of you are into sports, you know, if you're on a team and you're out there and you're practicing, you're having fun and you're practicing, you can goof off a little, you build relationships, but when you're competing, you got each other's back.
Right.
And that's what we're trying to build in this relationship with the students amongst each other, is that they can give feedback to one another, just as they would if they were, you know, playing basketball. I was watching the game last night thinking, how do they do this? They do it because they've practiced.
And they've got a relationship with each other, and they know each other, and they trust each other. Tim.
So just on this, so I'm a faculty associate, and part of my duties is to observe lecturers. That's that hostile aspect of it that it can come across, and it's for performance review. And so we have a sheet that we go through, and we're supposed to observe and note down things. So of course all of that comes from within my frame of reference. Regardless, it's hard to help that. But one thing that I did this time around was I asked the teachers, hey, can I bring in, you know, can I video your class? Can I video you? And it's not part of the official observation. It's just for you and for me, so we can, you know, confer that kind of thing, and you can have a record. And they both agreed, and they both really appreciated it, because when we did the post-observation kind of chat, they saw way more. After reviewing the video, they saw way more than they would have regularly. Rather than just me saying this is what I saw, they were like, oh, but I saw this too, and there was this that I didn't do. And I think that really encouraged them to think about maybe doing that more often.
Yeah.
You know, with the phone and doing kind of a self video as well. So just wanted to share that.
And it's
that
easy
was a positive
now.
thing.
Like before, 5 years
and it's
ago,
so much easier now. Yes.
you needed to get a video camera and set it up, and there's this weird looking tripod, kind of like this weird looking monitor in the back room. It becomes part of, you know, a new scary thing. But this, just sort of sitting on the chalkboard ledge.
You know, and John, to build on what you're saying, I think it's so important to have that sort of post-observation dialogue, and then grant them the opportunity. They self-identified all kinds of things that you didn't see or you didn't mention, and they're like, oh, I meant to do this, or it was my intention for that. They're going to run with that. They're not going to go, oh my God, you know, they're going to run with that. And I think about the classrooms. I have to tell you, it's interesting being an adult in a classroom, because I had a classroom class last term, you know, and I remember to sit down, because I'm not really the instructor. That's the hard part, because I've been an instructor for so long. So I sit down, and we have the little groups get up there and give a little presentation. They're nervous. They're younger people. They don't have a lot of experience. And one thing I started in that class, which was not happening, was after the little groups would do their presentation, and they're nervous and they've made mistakes, oh, they screwed up, you know, they're doing all this self-doubt right in front of you, you can see it. When they're done, no one was saying nice job.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've been in industry a long time. We always do that. Yahoo! You know, doing all this stuff just to support our colleagues. They were doing it, so I started it. Just out of, you know, best practice, right? So they'd come down and I'd go, hey, you guys are rock stars. Woo, 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 woo.
Awesome.
Then other people started to do it, and then you could see them smile as they came down. They were nervous, they made mistakes, but they really did a good job. So even having this peer assessment sort of built in, so as an instructor you might encourage positive feedback.
Yeah.
And then it carried on throughout the semester after someone would present.
In yesterday's session, they talked about positive group behavior and or constructive group behavior and destructive group behavior, and that's a good part of it. Focusing on the positives, noticing them, whether you're doing this on your own or whether you're, you know, for me, I now notice like, all right, I've got enthusiasm, that's good. And then I'll say, and I'm also still moving around way too much. But that's okay, because at least I know that it's rooted in a context that's bigger. One of the big things that we know for student learning is reflection is so important. Testing yourself, doing it over and over again, interrogating what actually happened here, what is this? The same sorts of things occur for instructors and help us teach better and learn to teach better as well. So what can we learn from looking at ourselves? On the activity sheet here, and I should also mention, if you do not already know, at the very top of this, there's instructions to get in and get your own version of this paper copy, a digital version of it, and then all of the links work. There's also a spot at the very bottom of this. It's editable, so you can go and add your own notes and resources. So Tim, for example, if you've got a copy of the checklist on what you guys look for and you are able to share that, we would be happy to look at it, to have it as well. You can put that at the bottom. But one of the things on here that I want to point out and have you look at is the C. Patricia Cross Academy. They've done all of these amazing learning techniques. And I'm going to have the volume off for this. And we're just going to talk over it if it loads. So they've taken all of these classroom techniques and given a little 3-minute thing. So let's look at Jigsaw. In a Jigsaw, students work in small groups to do something, and here's an example of what it looks like. And maybe I should turn up the volume. I'm going to turn up the volume.
Students to be active and engaged in their learning. Group activities can increase student engagement and deepen understanding. Here's a proven technique that gets everyone involved and makes learning enjoyable.
They've got like 36 of these. So if you want to learn how to do any of these classroom techniques,
before teaching what they've learned to another group. Here's how it works. Select a subject and divide it in responsible through pieces.
all right, and I'm almost positive that they had some versions of this. Oh no, I chose the wrong one.
It was clear to see that every student was invested in learning. Here at the K. Patricia Cross Academy.
Some of those 36 have classroom examples where they actually bring it into a classroom and you get to see what's happening. Oh, forgive me for picking bad choice, having bad examples. But what can we learn from that? What are the things that we can learn through observation? Oftentimes, how many of you have been observed? Was it a harrowing experience? Was it a wonderful experience?
Oh, I'll speak to that because I've been observed many times. I've been observed in both industry and higher ed, and it really depends on the relationship that we talked about earlier that I would have with somebody doing the observation. In industry, pretty much you're always being observed by leaders or managers or people that are just, so that's always been positive for me. Teaching in higher ed one time, some guy came in the room, didn't know who he was, he sat down and he was late, so I had already begun. And I just kind of said, hey, can I help you? And he goes, I'm here to observe you. I'm like, well,
Wow.
okay, that's hard because I'm lecturing and don't know who you are. And then at the break, it was a nighttime class, at the break, he steps out in the hallway and he begins berating me, telling me that he didn't like my lecture style, he didn't like the engagement, that I had done a group activity, he didn't like that. And I'm like, you need to leave now. You need to leave now. I don't know who you are. Supposedly he was new in the system, but that's not the way to do it.
Right.
We really need to have sort of a pre-conference, talk about what it is, the observation, what the outcome should be. So it depends, Jen. So I've had good and I've had not so good.
And oftentimes, like if you do not have training as an outside observer, you can come in and say, you can focus on just about anything. So having some kind of a rubric or a spreadsheet that the instructor already knows about is an important part. And I would say that it's important in self-assessing as well. So even if you look at your own video of a classroom, you can focus on, what did I do, or how come I'm moving around so far all the time, that you never see anything else, all the positives that are happening in the classroom, or any of the other negatives, because you're obsessed with this one thing. And oftentimes, I've heard so many stories in faculty for their observation for tenure. People come in and they say, oh, your content was wrong, or you should have included this other part of your content because they're in the same department and they would have taught it differently. And there's so much of that gets in the way of what is actually happening here. Peter.
John, I think, in all of what we've said so far, I think what's important is the motivation behind it. You brought up that, this assessment in terms of evaluation of somebody's teaching quality, for example, versus evaluation to have a better quality teaching experience for the students. Those are two separate things.
Oh,
and
yeah.
they're kind of, a lot of the stress and the unfamiliarity and the unease that comes with these things is when those motivations get mixed up with one another.
And you also don't see the real person, because you see the gold standard lesson, because they know that it's
Right.
for performance. And really, you want to see someone on a regular day in a regular class.
Yeah.
And how can we be more effective? I agree.
Yeah, if you had known, Margaret, when they were coming and who they were and what it was all about, it would have given you some opportunity to prepare, which in some ways goes counter to the, I just want to see you on a regular day, but you can't, it's not a regular, it's Schrodinger's cat, right? It changes because you're watching it. And all of a sudden, what might be a regular thing with a group of students that you've already gotten a rapport with, now all of a sudden you see this shadow lurking in the back with a clipboard or whatever.
Right.
It's no longer a normal day in a normal situation.
The other thing, John, that I think you're all sort of alluding to, and that is, anyone who's been in the front of a classroom knows this one true fact: anything can happen.
Oh yeah.
And I can tell you stories. Anything can happen. There's a dynamic in learning in that classroom. And I'm a Murphy. We talked about Murphy's Law, right? If anything can go wrong, it will. And I can tell you some funny stories, but I will save them for happy hour. Anything can go wrong. And when you step in front of that class and you're ready to go and you've got a plan, anything can happen. And so that dynamic should also be part of, I think, the observation or assessment of instruction is, wow, you took that curveball and you handled it really well. And because you can't plan for those curveballs, it just comes from experience. And I think that's a level or a dimension of assessment that has to be considered is, how resilient are you? Are you agile? You're in front of the room and you're in charge. Did you maintain that presence?
Right. instructor presence is,
Yeah.
is a big part of it. So once we recognize, I'll turn the volume down again. Once we recognize that we're able to learn some things, how can we apply what we've learned to help students?
Mhm.
What changes get made after reflecting on your classroom? Or what changes can be made?
So if it's to do with the lesson itself, like did the activity work, did learning occur, were my objectives achieved? If no, then change that activity, change that lesson, so that would help.
Mm-hmm.
If it's about behavior, or what am I doing? I'm only talking to the strongest student in the class. I'm flying with the highest. Then I need to spread out. And as long as I'm accepting that and acknowledging what I've seen and have the will to be better, then it should improve for students, I think.
And you also talked about having feedback from students. So at the assignment level, would you consider that at the classroom level as well?
Well, I do. I mean, we have three kind of distinct stages in the writing class that I'm teaching at the moment. So I have them do at the end of each of those stages, I have them do a Google assessment, a Google form, you know, to kind of say how are things going, how could things be better. It's pretty low key. It's totally anonymous, and I'll put the results up, you know, for students to see, so they can see, oh, here's my view and here's everyone else's.
And that I think is super important, because not only can they see how they respond versus how everybody else is responding, like, huh, everybody else in the class really likes that thing that I hate. It might not be, you know, that changes one's attitude towards it, but it also shows that you're actually paying attention to it. They're not just filling it out for no reason at all, and there's an opportunity, you know, you're listening, you care.
And they can see that their comment was included.
Yeah.
Along with everyone else's.
Does everybody fill out your form? How do you encourage people to?
I have done it a couple of ways. I've had it kind of just do it tonight, but the thing I find most effective is let's just have 5 minutes at the start of class to do it, and I'll be on my laptop and I'll switch it on, so to accept responses, and then they say, right, just, you know, turn your screens the other way so I can't see anything, type, and, you know, when you finished, don't close your laptop and show me that you finished, because I know the order that, you know, that it's been done in. Just go on Amazon or Facebook or whatever, and then we'll you know, after 5 minutes is up, we'll all stop and I'll turn it off. And then usually I get, you know, 15 out of 15 or whatever it is that I have. I have small classes, so I've got to be really careful in the class to.
Another way to do that is to do a graded anonymous survey in Canvas. So again, thinking back on the research of what works and what doesn't work, reflection is really important for students.
Mm-hmm.
And reflecting on what they learned, how was it important, how does it or does it not connect to my own interests, skills, personal life, etc. Those are the kinds of things that tie whatever happened in the classroom to them individually. So we can get feedback on what actually happened here, and you'll understand from that. Give them a point or two for filling that out, because that becomes part of the assignment, is building in not just do the skill, check the boxes, but also now reflect on, and if needed, make up something, make up a connection to your life, because even that will help them figure out.
I do ask that question actually, is like, how are you using the skills in this class in your other classes, you know, if at all, and I find it really helpful because I teach a pretty unpopular course, honestly. for students, and it really helps them see, okay, so I have to take this, but I can see that it's helping me elsewhere.
That Venn diagram of
So
effort
that's-
is great. If you can get those circles to overlap and whatever they do in your class applies towards some other class, that's great. Sally, you were going to say something.
In my class we have a similar survey. We have these 3 exams, and after exam 1 we have them fill out a survey. Then the idea is to push them to be metacognitive about how they went through and studied for the exam, and how did their performance go, and to really help them reflect a little bit, and then we incorporate that into a lecture, which for my class is easier because it's a class on how people learn. But the more we could make it connected to the other material that was in the class. But I think at least pushing for, well, you just did this assignment, you need to reflect on it to see, okay, well, what would you do next time you're writing, or next time you're actually doing this type of exam again, because they don't typically get support for metacognition.
Right.
And that's a shame, because metacognition will help every class. It will help the students in whatever your subject. If you can get them to think about how they learn, think about what they just did and how it can be applied in other classes and other areas of their life, why it's important, that is so important. And it should be built in, put my foot down here, in every class. At some level, you should have that part of your assignments. And you should, as an instructor, also use that, because if you see that 80% of your class is able to do that well, you're doing pretty good. If you can, you've got 20% to go. But, and it'll vary from assignment to assignment. Some assignments you'll do that will apply very well towards one group or a small group, and others will be really popular for others. But overall, yeah. Peter?
What also seems to be very important in terms of practical benefit is that the information stream is 2 ways. So for example, the thing that you said, kind of like I share the comments that the students make to me with the class. Mm-hmm. If you don't do that, then what is in it for the students? Mm-hmm. And so you make the point that, well, you can give them a couple of points in your grade, but at the big level, in the student evaluation part at the end of the semester, we as instructors, we're apparently not allowed to make that part of the grade. If I say, well, I would want to reserve 3% or something for your grade for evaluating the course and providing feedback, that's not allowed officially,
right?
At least. And so I think, we have a lot of emphasis on, data analytics that comes, through learning management systems, and use those. But
increasingly too, like this is a thing that's going up.
But what is overlooked, I think, in general, is the information that would come from a really student evaluation point of view.
Yeah.
Because they are always there, when the teaching and the instruction is going on. But because there's nothing in it for them, why would they provide you with valuable information that would be helpful to increase your teaching if there's nothing in it for themselves?
Right.
And so the sharing of information is not there. And I think that's a major problem in terms of assessment.
Anytime you fill out a survey and you don't hear back on whenever I have a survey, I always say, share this feedback, share survey results with whoever filled it out, just so they can see that, they're the only ones, or they're not the only ones, or you're actually doing something with it. It's a small thing. One of the things you said, Peter, yesterday in the teaching soft skills was the importance of routine. So I think that if you have somebody observe your classroom, or if you build in some sort of observational thing where you get feedback from your students in the classroom, if you only do that once a year, it becomes a big and scary thing, and the students can unload on you because you are, they've been saving up all year for that student evaluation. Finally, I get a chance to state my mind, and they'll unload on you. But if you do it every week, then that evaluation will be just another one. They will have already seen that you care because you've been giving them that, sharing back with them, with you actively showing that you are listening and changing your behaviors accordingly. So it becomes a much less, it becomes part of the routine. And then it's not scary. They can see that it has an effect, and it's great. Danny.
So kind of a related question. Say we get a course and we're teaching it for the first time this semester. What would be your advice on the frequency of some sort of formal self-assessment? Like, should we do it just once at the end? Should we try to do it once a month?
For the instructor, for the students?
For the instructor to, self-assess how their course is going.
I after every class period.
Yeah.
I guess, no, because you said formal.
Mm-hmm.
A formal self-assessment. Boy, I'm not actually even sure what that.
I'm thinking in terms of kind of recording ourselves and kind of reflecting on that.
I think that the more you do it, the easier it will be and the more you learn. Just as the students, the more that they think about what they're learning, and Sally will talk about this in the how you learn, how students learn, how people learn course. Reflection is a big element of it, and the distributed reflection, distributed practice, distributed learning. So you don't just do it in one mass and then that's it, but you do it here, you do it here, you do it here, you do it here, and you keep going back to what you've learned in the past about it. The more the better. It's extra work thinking about that. Sometimes I'm done teaching and I'm exhausted and I don't want to think about what just happened. But it's helpful if I do.
But I do feel like here generally as a good place to start is to at least have a mid-course evaluation, at least early on, like a few weeks into the class or right after your first big whatever cycle of your class is. And at least, I was part of this new professor program, and that was one thing that they had to sign on to, and that seems like a fairly common thing for people to do. It can be very short, just 2 or 3 questions about how's this class going, incorporated into something else. But yeah, definitely more the better if you can collect that information. Yeah.
So we have 10 minutes left. What have we not talked about?
I wanted to build up something that we were just talking about, and on the embarrassment part, about the routine, right, of sharing this data, and showing students, right, that you're caring and that you actually take the data and do something with it. I think it's also a great opportunity for you to talk about how you deal with errors, right, and to model for students. Okay, well, here's something that I think maybe not kind of messed up, but I didn't do it in the optimal way that I could have. And here's how I'm gonna do something about it. And that's a perfectly fine way because I'm learning as an instructor, as we all do. And then depending on your class, it could be a really good way to demonstrate how you deal with data, right? Because that's true in almost every discipline, that you take data and you analyze it and you think about it critically as a scholar. And depending on what kind of data you have and how you can actually show that it applies to the way of thinking in your discipline, that could be another way to model again. We can actually take all sorts of data and be critical about it and take the positives and the negatives and change the way things are based on that.
And tying back to yesterday, we talked a little bit about the soft skills or the non-academic skills. Modeling how to deal with, resilience is such an important thing. And if you don't show empathy and humility, how can we expect our students to do it? If you don't show sort of a relentless curiosity of how can I make myself be better as an instructor, then these things are important, and they're not part of a formal academic curriculum, but they are part of a much larger and in many ways more important thing. So yeah, I think that the idea of being a human, I mean, how many of us remember back to when we were freshmen and that professor was up in the front of the classroom and boy, you know, godlike in their authority, and they knew everything, and we were like, oh, write everything down. And we were writing down all kinds of mistakes, weren't we? I mean, looking back now as instructors, we make all kinds of mistakes, and we see our students write them down like the truth, capital T. We need to be honest that we are also still learning, and it's okay to learn, and it's okay to make mistakes, and when we do make mistakes, we adjust it and are honest about it. Otherwise, we perpetuate, you know, false narratives about the deification of instructors. All right. We talked a little bit about the techniques not aimed at instructors, so depersonalizing it, saying let's not even talk about what you're doing, let's talk about what's happening in the classroom, and you can do that again on your own. If you set the video camera over here so you don't actually even see yourself, that's a great, you know, day one, put it over here, see what the class does. Day two, put it in the back of the room so you only see you. Or day three, put it up here at the lectern so you know, you don't see the class but you only see you. And take the different perspectives of the classroom. Focus on what is the class doing? What am I doing next time? You know, make those disparate and sort of separate evaluations or areas of expertise, areas of focus, I mean. Keeping it as an instructor-driven thing is, I think, really cool. So what are the things that I want to look at? And once you identify what some of those things are, the subsequent recordings, if you want to do a video recording, or the subsequent follow-up feedback, you can hone in on that. Even at the, as Tim was saying, the activity to activity, assignment to assignment feedback that you get from students. If they say, oh, I really hated this thing, now the next time you do it, you can tweak it and say, all right, now I want you to focus on this little, or these little parts. Which of these little parts did you like or not like? So then you can start to focus in. But as an instructor, you are, you know, you have that ability to ask them to focus in on structure, what they look at, and what you can work on at a time. Are there any other things that came up in this discussion that we should talk about?
You know, a general issue, if you had an assignment, you have a rubric for it.
Yes.
Would you recommend, you know, say you have 20 points in your rubric for the different topics of your assessment, would you recommend to have like a, you know, 2 points for an evaluation and then have an anonymous survey, or you know, have it part of the grade essentially, you know?
I would give them, as part of that meta-analysis that Sally was talking about, or metacognition, yes, that is part of learning. And if you look at the research, it's a big part of the learning. Even things like something as simple as the utility value. If you can have them self-generate why this is useful, it affects not only their work in your class, but it affects their whole trajectory in college and learning beyond that. So whenever they're able to build some of these things themselves, they can, it's good for you, for their class, for the students, but they won't do it because they're students and they're gaming the system. They won't do it unless you give them some extrinsic motivation, 2 points, 3 points, whatever, to do that oftentimes. Once they start to do it and it becomes routine, we hope that they'll learn that, but you know, we all need a little bit of a kick in the butt to do it, to get started.
Okay, so if that's true, and I agree with that completely, you know, like, so how is that different from, you know, incorporating the student evaluation at the end of the semester in the same fashion? You know, why would you be prohibited as an instructor to make student evaluation a percentage of the grade of the course?
I don't know the answer to that. I suspect it's the same, you know, it's there for a different purpose, right? The purpose of the student evaluations is not to make your teaching better, I think. The purpose of the evaluations, the official evaluations, is to document whether your students find your teaching good.
So is there
Right
a
or wrong?
correlation between student evaluations and teaching proficiency?
There absolutely is, right? Because that's the measurement. But it's not the purpose. The purpose, it's not a formative, let's make your teaching better assessment. It's a summative, how good is your teaching assessment, right? And it's based, you know, they give you that grade of like 3.7 or 4 point, whatever the different levels. And you look at that and you say, wow. And maybe your tenure advisor would say, huh, you really need to do something with these grades. Or they will say, they're fine, focus on your research more. Probably they'll say that, or they're good enough for that. It's not a, this is here to help you teach better thing. It's a, and because it's only a one-time thing, it can't be. Now, officially, people will have different, they'll probably say something different officially.
I feel like it's differences in just like those like teaching objectives, right? Like they just, that's not what they are looking for. They don't care like what types of activity you're engaging students in and how students are engaged while you're in the classroom, how they're engaged in specific assignments and the specific dynamics. Just like generally, do students come away with a good impression of this class?
And my understanding is that that's actually a legislative thing. So it's not a university thing. I believe it's at least in Wisconsin, it's a legislative thing that they require that. And it is, or maybe it wasn't intended as such, but it has become a summative assessment of our universities doing a good job? Are our students happy in the classes that they take? Which is different from our students learning in the classes that they take. Are students learning how to learn? All right, we are out of time. Thank you so much for coming today. On the spring break, we've got lots of bagels and coffee and orange juice left over, so please take some home with you. And on your way out the door, if you could just fill out one of these little, check a couple of boxes, and here, Sally, I'll get you one. Check a couple of boxes in the, or do you have one?
I don't either yet.
Oh,
Thanks.
And let us know what's up. Thank you. Dustin, I'll get you one for you.
Okay, thank you.
I will put this, Dustin, I saw you took a picture of it, so I will put this slideshow on the activity sheet on the bottom under notes. And it's actually some great research. A lot of it happens here on campus.